Hello, I'm Miguel Strickland, Assistant Principal here at Goldsmith Shipman Elementary School with our score report presentation using our kindergarten DIBELS data for EFD 620. Goldsmith Shipman is the third largest school in the Huntsville City School District. We are much larger than a couple of our high schools. We are approaching 1,000 students. So the kindergarten demographics here for Goldsmith Shipman, we have 144 total kindergartners. We have 108 kindergarten students that are Caucasian, 10 that are African American, 7 that are Asian Pacific Islander, 16 multiracial students, 2 Hispanic students, and 1 American Indian Alaskan Native student. So what is DIBELS? The dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills, DIBELS, are a set of procedures and measures for assessing the acquisition of early literacy skills, which is a big deal, especially in the state of Alabama, because we just implemented a new literacy program. When is the data collected? This data was collected at the beginning of this year. We started our school year with all students remote. They have recently come back on a staggered schedule, and then will very soon come back all students together for face-to-face learning, with the exception of the ones who decided to join our new virtual academy. And so students are officially tested 3 times per year, but progress monitored regularly to check their progress. Okay, so we have 8 kindergarten classes here at Goldsmith Shipman, and so I won't go through every single one and read the exact same data to you because that would get repetitive. But if you look at the bottom of the scoring sheet, there is a legend on the bottom, and it's color-coded to tell you essentially where the students kind of score, where they stand. Also, it denotes that if there's an asterisk beside the student's name, that they were tested remotely, because some of them that did not test remotely, you'll see a couple that do not have an asterisk. They were tested once we got back actually into the building face-to-face. Also, for confidentiality reasons, students' names and teachers' names were whited out on this presentation. So if you look up top, I won't go too in-depth on the first 2, but you got your national DDS percentile and your DP, which is your district percentile. We're gonna not get so in-depth with those, but then you have your LNF, which is your letter naming fluency, your PSF, which is your phoneme segmentation fluency, your NWF, which is your nonsense word fluency, your CLS, which is your nonsense word fluency with correct letter sounds, your WRC, which is your nonsense word fluency with words recoded correctly, and your WRF, which is your word reading fluency, and then also the composite scores. So if you just take a minute to kind of scan the sheet, it's essentially broken down to, from lowest score to highest score on each sheet. The students toward the top are going to be kind of your lower scoring students who quite probably didn't make the composite score, that's 306. And then once you get about to the middle of your sheet, you get the students that were very close. They'd be more in the green and yellow range. And then once you get more toward the bottom, you've got your students that are closer to the blue and the green composite scores, which are your highest level students for the class. And so on class, we'll say class A here, if you just look, the student at the very bottom scored very well, did a very good job, especially if you pay attention to the WRC, which everybody else scored a 0, student scored a 30. And so that's outstanding. Also, like I said, the composite score is a 306, and this student scored a 457. So just carrying the class, so it seems. We will go to class 2 here, and so like I said, that it is split essentially the same kind of with, well, you say here, but then the student didn't fare so well in certain areas overall, but then if you look here, their composite score is a 347. So they did have areas of weakness, but also had areas of good strength as well. So, and so With this class, it's the very same thing if you look at the way the scores are. But even some of the students who didn't reach that composite score, there were certain aspects of this test that they did fairly decent in. Like the composite score for the PSF is a 5, and then this student overall, their score was not that great, but they had a 9 in that area, which is right in there with some of the top students in that class. Same thing with the next class here. And so just going down to look, look at these scores here. One of their top student in this class scored a 548, which means that they're almost ready for a first grade level, but there'll be certain aspects that, of course, just being so young and being in kindergarten, that they're not fully ready for. Same thing here. And like I said, we won't go over all the things at the top again because there's a legend at the bottom of every sheet, and it would get monotonous. Same thing here. Look at that score at the bottom there, 553. And so, and once again, that student was tested remotely. And so if you look right here, even the students here that had the composite scores, their PSF, which is your phoneme segmentation fluency, breaking the word down, they didn't score so well. And so issues that we had as far as, district-wide and school-wide would be score validity. The reason that score validity was an issue is because we were not sure if the parents were sitting there coaching the students or not. And so, of course, we'll retest to give us a better idea to see where that student really scores. And then, of course, the low scores. We want those low scores to be brought up, to where they're in the passing range of the blue and green rather than the red and the yellow. So I had one teacher that I spoke to who she had requested her parents leave the room whenever she was doing the Dibbles test for her students to make sure that it was just her and the student was comfortable, and that way she could get a more true reading of where that student scored. Areas of celebration. All right, so we'll celebrate all the students on grade level or above. 65 of those students that reached the composite score, that's pretty good. Kindergarten class B with the phoneme segmentation fluency, out of all 8 classes, that kindergarten class scored the best in that one particular area, to where there were a lot of students that, got a 0 on that particular area. And then another reason to celebrate would be that the teachers are able to group the students and tailor lessons to the skills that they need because of these data scores. So it makes it a little easier for them. All right, areas of weakness. So the letter naming fluency seems to be one of the weaker areas overall. The words recoded correctly was definitely one of the weaker areas that we had for our kindergarten class. And then the phoneme segmentation fluency. Even class B struggled a little bit in this area, but overall as an entire kindergarten group, they did not score very well with that section. And so the next steps that we take, in this Dibbles process would be the student grouping. So like I said, from those scores, it gives you an idea of how you can group your students and who needs to go together. So it makes it just a little bit easier for you. And then you get to determine the interventions, of course, whether, everybody gets to tier 1, but then the tier 2 and the tier 3. So you determine the interventions that you need after you group those students together, and then you can just go at it and, hopefully bring those students who are kind of borderline, bring them up, because it might not take very rigorous interventions for them, but hopefully you bring everybody up in this process. And then the progress monitoring. So after you group them and you do the interventions and your progress monitoring, it gives you a real-time, better idea of how these students are scoring and how they're doing overall. And this has been my presentation. Thank you all for tuning in today.